welcome back to Leia's Library. Find yourself a cozy corner, get yourself some tea, and let's get started. It's Pride Month! And I thought I would celebrate by talking about my favorite queer books. And then I realized I had too many for one video, so I've decided to split it up into 3 videos based on different categories. So today we'll be going over part 1, which will be focusing on my favorite books that have Sapphic and Achillean, or gay and lesbian, or WLW and MLM, women loving women and men loving men, representation. Let's get started. So, the first book is one that I talked about kind of recently, so I won't dwell on it too long, but it's They Both Die at the End by Silvera. It is a YA contemporary / sci-fi. It's about 2 teenage boys who meet up on the last day of their lives in order to have one final adventure. This book has Achillean representation in the form of a gay character and a bisexual character. This book will tear your heart out of your chest and give it back to you gift wrapped. 2 main characters, Mateo and Rufus, complement each other so well, and I loved just watching them grow as they got to know each other. Simply lovely. Please read it. Next up, we have The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This is a fantasy magical realism fiction. This follows Linus Baker, who is a man in his 40s who leads a quiet, solitary life in a tiny house with his devious cat and his old records. He is a caseworker at the department in charge of magical youth, and he spends his days overseeing the well-being of children in government-sanctioned orphanages. Not just any children, they're magical children. However, Linus's life takes a sudden turn when he is requested by extremely upper management to evaluate a certain orphanage, and whether it's particularly dangerous occupants, notably the Antichrist himself, are likely to bring about the end of days. This book features a gay couple, and not just a gay couple, but a gay couple in their 40s. I find it so rare to see romances featuring anything other than teenagers or people in their 20s, so I just thought that was nice. We don't get to see that often. Bonus. A descriptor on my book says it's like being wrapped up in a big gay blanket, and that's just the perfect way to describe this book. You will almost certainly feel the warm and fuzzies after reading this. It's very charming and whimsical. I find it very similar to Terry Pratchett's writing or Douglas Adams. It's a very lovely found family story, and also just learning to stick up for what's right, even if it's uncomfortable for you, and learning to see people for how they truly are and not just for what's been assigned to them or the prejudices that have been assigned to them. Just lots of good stuff all around. Next up is the Girls of Paper and Fire series by Natasha Ngan. I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. This is a YA fantasy. So in this world, there are 3 different caste systems. The highest caste are the demons, or the moon caste, and then the lowest caste are humans, which are also called the paper caste. So each year, 8 paper caste girls are selected to become paper girls in order to serve the king. And this year, Lei is stolen from her home in order to become a paper girl when the king hears a rumor about her entrancing demon eyes. She's born with these golden eyes that only demons are supposed to have. And now Lei must learn the charms and skills to survive in the palace and survive as a king's consort until she does the unthinkable and falls in love. This is our first Sapphic book on the list, featuring 2 lesbian characters. Firstly, it is very important to note that this book deals very, very heavily with sexual assault. It's sort of like it's a big part of the story, so you can't avoid it. The author, in my opinion, handles it very, very tastefully, very thoughtfully and gracefully. She doesn't shy away from the impact, but it's never graphic enough for shock value. There's clearly a lot of care put into this story. However, there were still moments that made me viscerally uncomfortable just because of the subject matter. I still strongly recommend this book, but please be aware of your own triggers before reading it, or only try to read it on good days if you decide to do so. Moving on, the love story in this is very beautiful. The characters are given enough time to kind of bloom individually before they come together, and their chemistry is undeniable. The world is very intriguing, and the magic in it is very intriguing, and you learn more about it and the magic as the series progresses. There are 3 books in total. The final book just came out last year, I think, or this year. It's not a perfect series, but I still really enjoyed it, and I do recommend it. Next up, we have The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a fiction book. It is about an aging Hollywood bombshell named Evelyn Hugo who is finally ready to tell her life story. She chooses an unknown magazine reporter named Monique Grant to be her autobiographer, for reasons known only to herself, until it becomes clear that Evelyn's life intersects with Monique's in a very shocking way. Evelyn is known for her 7 husbands and 7 marriages, but not a lot of the details have been released, so that's why everyone's clamoring to get their hands on this story. This is another Sapphic book. This has both bi and lesbian representation, and actually gay. Yeah, there is a gay character in there too. How did I forget that? But yeah, I enjoyed this book so much. I was surprised by just how much I enjoyed it. I couldn't put it down. What I thought was really interesting about this book was that how it portrayed the relationship between 2 women. It was a very flawed relationship. They loved each other a lot, but they were not always good to each other. And what I like about that was that it was just willing to show a flawed queer relationship. There's this pressure on queer couples where it almost feels like you have to make it work and you have to be this fairy tale perfect couple just in order to justify being able to be in a couple, because it was just such a fight to get to where we could even be in couples that, now you have to make it work in order just to make it worth it. But the reality of the situation is that, queer people are every bit as human as other people, and sometimes relationships don't work out, and sometimes they're not good relationships. And, everyone brings baggage to a relationship, no matter what your sexual identity is. And I don't know, I just like that normalization that queer relationships don't have to be 100% perfect in order to be valid, And the rest of the story is great too. Next up is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, because of course this one had to be on the list. This is a historical fiction / mythology retelling. It is a retelling of the tale of Achilles, the Greek hero, told from the perspective of his childhood friend and lover, Patroclus. So we are going back to, fittingly, an Achillean story with our 2 boys, Achilles and Patroclus, 2 gay men. I just really love these 2 a lot. When I die, mix my ashes with a copy of this book so I may read it in the afterlife. If you know, you know. If you're familiar with Greek mythology, you will probably love this book. If you are not familiar with Greek mythology, that's okay. You'll probably still love this book. Probably. No guarantee. Next up, we have Picture Us in the Light by Kelly Loy Gilbert. This is a contemporary YA fiction. It is about a high school senior named Danny, who has just been accepted to his dream university, where he'll be pursuing his dream career of being an artist, which he's very excited about. But what he's less excited about is having to leave behind his best friend Harry, And as if that isn't enough to worry about, Danny discovers a box in his parents' closet that reveals that they've been keeping a lot of secrets from him for his whole life. For our last book, this is again another Achillean story. This book isn't as outright queer as the rest, but it's definitely there and it's definitely important, so it absolutely counts. Content warning that this book deals heavily with mental health, depression, and death by suicide. So if those are sensitive topics for you, just be aware before going in. I devoured this book. It was so good, and I strongly recommend it to everyone. Yeah, I stand by that. Yeah. This is an honorable mention. It is The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. This is an adult high fantasy. It is not a queer story, but it has two POV characters who are in a very lovely sapphic relationship, and I love them a lot, and I just needed to include them because I love them a lot and I love this book so much. So I am contractually obligated to myself to talk about it whenever I possibly can. And I've talked about it in the past, and I will be talking about this series more so in another book, so I won't go into it too much, but just do yourself a favor, pick it up. And that wraps up our part 1 Pride video series. Let me know what you thought down in the comments. Do you like any of these books? Would you like to read any of these books? I recommend all of them. Find me on Instagram at Leia Like the Princess, where you can also find my little side business store, Moonlit Cat Creations. You can also go directly to the website at moonlitcatcreations.com. And if you like what I do, you can tip me on coffee, but absolutely no pressure, just good vibes. And remember to stay cozy.